that would be all just for the beginning. And let's start with first presentation where I will talking about those 5 trends areas that will be important for building the growth and data capabilities in mobile gaming and app first companies. Of course, it's my subjective view. If you ask that question to chat GPT, you will get a little bit different answer. But it's my subjective view, what I think is especially important, and how to really make sure that that competence is actually growing in those companies. So if we start from in general, of course, in the last month, sometimes the mood in the gaming and app first industry is not the best, because if we look at the data, especially and in that data we have the revenue and downloads rate year over year. So each dot is showing year over year data. We see that between in the middle of 2022, that was quite challenging time, where actually all the data year over year was not the best. But what is actually happening, it seems that the next month should be really much better, because even if you compare and look at the data for the last 3 months, starting from October, November, and December, actually those year over year rates are actually getting much better, which means I think still we are in good place in terms of the business. If we look actually at non-gaming, it's not worse. Sometimes it's even better, because if you look at the non-gaming on so applications, Google Play for and iOS combined together, we see the similar trend. So we had kind of dip a little bit in the middle of 2022, but again, the last 3 months were actually much better, which means there is still a lot of potential in the industry, and still a lot of stuff that can be done. And again, I think to unlock the potential in that data, it makes sense to look at that a little bit deeper. And again, from my perspective, I would look at following 5 points. The first one is actually looking for market opportunities. I talk about that quite often, because I see it's still kind of overlooked topic. And if we look at the data closer, we see that in general, over the last years, actually, especially during the pandemic time, the share of US in the industry revenue and industry downloads was quite kind of stable. Actually, in terms of revenue, it increased about 2 percentage points during the pandemic time. But then what is happening is that in the last months, especially in the last 3-4 months, that importance of those non-US markets are actually even getting bigger. And if we go even deeper, in this case, I'm looking at Android data. If we go even deeper, I know it's not easy and nice slide, but I think always going out of average is the best idea, and look, okay, what is happening in the specific genre. And we see that in general, over the whole industry, if we look at the whole year together, in general, US still is, of course, the most important, but it's actually not doing very well if we compare it with other markets, because we see that there are a lot of markets, like, for example, Brazil, or countries like, for example, like, Australia, Hong Kong, that actually were doing much better in terms of year-over-year rates, because again, each number is showing year-over-year growth for the specific genre and for the specific country. And again, we see that some genres were doing well. For example, like casual games were in general in better position than, for example, core games, because core games like role-playing, casino, or like strategy had quite challenging times, especially those ones that were very dependent on US and very dependent on Wales are actually right now in a little bit worse positions than those that are more like spread across much more countries and more geographies. Again, that's why I think looking at more markets than the US is actually getting even way more relevant than it used to be. And if we look at the downloads, because of course that was just revenue, we see the same. So again, US is much lower, much more below, like, you know, average, because, you know, the first line is showing the worldwide. So in general, the US was actually growing like, you know, 9 percentage points lower year over year versus games in general. And again, we see similar situation around like casual or like, you know, some other genres. But we see that, for example, some genres like strategy were growing, especially in terms of downloads, much faster in terms of emerging markets than it used to be. Which again, I think is adding even more interesting opportunities in terms of, you know, how to adjust monetization, for example. Yeah, so like, you know, a lot of core games were mostly focused on IIP purchases, but if we see that they are growing in emerging markets, that probably is adding a little bit more opportunities for how to actually add some additional monetization ideas like ads or some rewarded videos and so on. And if we look at non-gaming apps, we see actually quite similar trend. So if we look at the share of US revenue, and in this case, it's based on our data AI. So we have combined in-app purchases and subscriptions. So in this case, in terms of applications, we have, I would say, higher, of course, share of subscriptions. We see that this importance of US was even higher than in case of gaming, but kind of very similar data, being honest, like around 30%. And again, we see the same trend that last 3 months, those non-US markets are actually growing nicer than just US. And if we go deeper around a few specific let's call it genres in non-gaming, I started from downloads, because in non-gaming, in many cases, these downloads are even a little bit more relevant than revenue, because in many of those categories are more like monetized via ads rather via subscriptions. But we see again, we see that, of course, like the highest percentage of downloads are coming from India, are coming from like, you know, Pakistan, and all those markets that in many cases are growing much faster than US. Still, US actually was doing pretty well, at least in terms of downloads. But in some genres, for example, in like health and fitness tools, those non-US markets were doing extremely well. And of course, in this case, when we have the data, we can ask ourselves, okay, is the English enough? Because always, whatever we do, some gaming and app-first activities, we are focusing on English, and we can approach that topic in many different ways. One of the source of the data that I really like is actually the data that is updated quite frequently. It's called English Proficiency Index, like kind of research that is done across the world that can compare what is the level of English in different markets and how to read the data. In general, if the market has below 50, it shows very kind of low level of English in the specific country. If we have more than 60, it's very high, and something between is kind of still kind of medium level of knowledge. So, and then so on one X we have the English Proficiency Index, and then on the other hand we have download growth year over year. And of course, still in those markets, in those gaming markets like US matters at most, but we see a lot of markets that are growing extremely high, like see Algeria, Cambodia, Nepal, Bangladesh. Okay, they are very small, but especially for ad monetized games that are mostly focused on like lower value users, they will be actually extremely interesting niches, especially that the size of the wheel is actually showing the scale of downloads in terms of. So we have actually three attributes combined together. And for example, we see that interestingly, even Algeria or Iraq actually became quite big in terms of downloads if you compare it with for example, European markets. And of course, it's hard to read that data. So let's exclude some extremes, which means that we see still a lot of markets that actually are growing very fast, and they don't have really high level of knowledge in English. Yeah, for example, Indonesia. Yeah, so it still has like 55, which means it's kind of okay-ish level of knowledge, but not very high. Yeah, and we have some markets like Turkey, Egypt. Egypt has even low level of English, and still it's actually many of those markets are growing like 20% year over year. So of course we can look at that and that perspective and see which of those markets can be really interesting for further localization activities, and which of them could be really interesting to extend our user acquisition campaigns and so on. I think it's really good kind of grant to make sure that the data and growth data and data people work together actually to find new potential for the company. Of course, US always will be the biggest, but if we find a few nice niches, that can be very strong for the company. And if we look at non-gaming, it's actually quite similar data. So we see again very strong growth, for example, from like Bangladesh, Algeria, Uzbekistan, and like Morocco. And of course, if we exclude that data, we see of course extremely big importance of India. It's even bigger in non-gaming than gaming, surprisingly. Indonesia, and then, for example, even United Arab Emirates, where most of the time you are doing the let's see the English campaigns, but actually the data shows that not necessarily that English level is so high there. And then if we even go deeper and we ask ourselves, okay, let's look at that topic even deeper. It's quite interesting even to look that, for example, India, like everyone now is talking about India, and in general, I was surprised that actually the more or less the official data shows that level of English in India is not so high as we expect. There is like 1 point, like let's call it 4 billion of people, and just around 125 million knows that English really well. So of course that is more like the upper class in the India, but if we look at the different source of the data, I remember we discussed the data even for the Google data. So like the data show that 9 of 10 new users for like google.com in India is actually non-English speaker. So it's quite important to look at that. And what is quite interesting that actually it's not only just about Hindi, because it's obvious, but for example, like the people who spoke in Bengali, it's almost the same number as people who speak English very well. Yeah. So if you look at the perspective that in India alone you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 local languages that have more than 50 million people, that's actually it's kind of changing quite interestingly the perspective that you have on the growth of the business there. And then it even comes from the business side, because you can look at that even from the perspective of the sites. For example, like I look at one example category, which is the puzzle games on the Android, and I look, okay, who is, for example, spending money on Google there? And in this case, we have advertisers divided into 5 leagues. So like the first league are those that are spending the most amount of money. Yeah. Then we have second league, third league, and so on. And what is interestingly, we see that actually because like US is kind of so competitive, and everyone remembers about US. So whoever starts UA campaigns, he's doing that thinking about US. It's quite interesting to see how actually smaller players are actually less present, for example, in India on that category versus in US. So sometimes it should be a bit counterintuitive that if you are a smaller player, it's just sometimes better to look for those niches and those new opportunities, because again, like even let's say Colombia, not necessarily for top company can be interesting market, but if you are smaller, that can be really a profitable, really nice market for the future. But the data shows kind of counterintuitive that we are just choosing the lowest risk. Yeah, okay, I know US is important, so if I open new UA campaigns, I'm starting there. So that's the first topic. Then the second topic, which is of course more and more interesting, is actually data privacy. Yeah, and of course there is like so much discussion around the topic, and we see more and more data showing that in general, like users care about the topic. There was very interesting research done by Ipsos that showed, okay, what percentage of respondents were concerned about online privacy, and we see actually that not necessarily even the only the like only Western markets, the people from Western markets care about their privacy. Even the people from like tier 2 and tier 3 countries actually care about that. And what is interestingly, if we look at the data just related to mobile apps, because in this research there was the question, okay, how many of you are concerned about privacy in terms of mobile apps? We see a very similar trend actually, and those numbers are pretty high. So that's why it's not surprised there is so much discussion on the market around how to really do those marketing activities in privacy related way. And of course there was so much changes coming from like different market moves, like okay, the iOS 14 and later that really changed the way we do this online marketing for apps and gaming. But again, this is really the topic that really will be crucial for mobile gaming app first companies, because again, is there really the way to create this competitive advantage, especially that if we look again from the data from other perspective, and it's quite interesting research around, for example, like how many trackers have mobile apps in different categories. It's not so strange that users are sometimes so concerned, because many apps, they have like tens of different tracking codes that are checking different sources of the source of the information, that of course then creates a lot of pressure for the user. Yes, so like news, sports, like a lot of tracking codes, UA codes, affiliate codes, like a lot of stuff that really creates quite interesting movements. So that's why this all privacy related topics will be really important. And even from Google perspective, I'm not sure how many of you heard that just recently, just really a few days ago, Google announced quite a few interesting things around Android Sandbox, which is like, again, this privacy-related framework for doing online like marketing in mobile apps. So I really encourage you to, if you are doing growth and user acquisition, and you haven't heard about that announcement, I really encourage you to go there, because there is much more details about this sandbox versus in the previous announcements, much more details around how those design proposals that were initially proposed by Google for kind of this privacy restricted marketing activities, how they actually will work in the future. So again, if you want to be less surprised versus what happened in case of iOS, then it's good time to start to look at the topic, especially since a few days ago. And there is really a lot of details around what are those design proposals for example, for like attribution reporting, that will be kind of for your marketing activities, for topics that will be kind of more related to how to do this interest-based advertising, or like, for example, for how to do the remarketing in this new approach. And then, of course, if we look at the data, the data moves us to monetization opportunities as well, because always data is connected with the monetization. And of course, again, if we look at the data for how much money is really on that market, it's not easy, for example, to estimate what is the market on ads, because on IIP we have pretty good source on data AI. Data AI is including the IIP and subscriptions. On ads, it's much less data. We did some kind of analysis based on different aspects, trying to estimate what is the size of the ads market in different markets. And we see that, of course, still, even if we look at that market together, we see US, Japan, Korea, of course, they are still the most important markets. But if we look at this ads part, we can see that actually many markets are getting more important in the view once we start to add not just IIP, but we start to add ads as well, yeah, because it seems that in some markets like India, this ads revenue that this market is actually even bigger than IIP part, yeah. So for example, like we see that in this case, if we look just on IIP revenue for the last year, like India was smaller than Saudi Arabia, but if we combine IIP and ads, it's most likely even higher than, for example, like Spain. So that's again, that's I think is really this topic that will be important for many companies, trying to understand what is the real potential of the market, how actually we can combine those localization activities, how we can really actually unlock the opportunity, and actually maybe even in what markets we should just start, for example, testing ads if we just have IIP driven games. And the same is really related to non-gaming as well, yeah, because we have actually the same and very similar situation. And then if we go even deeper and we look at the market data, quite recent one, we see that, for example, like fastest growing digital ad markets, they are not only US. You saw that, for example, like the IP on US in the last year was increasing by around minus 10% in average, yeah. But at the same time, the ads market is supposed to be growing by almost 20%, which means that even in Western markets, there is a lot of opportunity in this hybrid monetization, in trying to actually try to get those additional dollars, not only just from another set of ways, but maybe trying to extend this potential group of users who are delivering the value to the games, but just try and get money from ads. It's even more important for countries like Argentina, Colombia, Peru, that are like tens of millions of users who are buying very little, but they are on very fast growing ads market, which means that eCPMs will be in like 1-2 years most likely much higher than they are now, for example. And then it's even getting more important to understand what are like the new source of the revenues for the company. And again, one of the very interesting innovations that matters especially for non-gaming, but I think for gaming as well, are those new subscription capabilities that are coming to the Android, that actually allow to have much more flexible way to create the base plans and the different plans for the users. There is really good description of it. Again, if someone has the especially non-gaming app and didn't hear about that, it's really good, I think, lever for the next year, because if we look at the data on the revenue side, on non-gaming, we see that actually this revenue on gaming is actually growing very fast, and actually most of the revenue is coming from subscriptions. Yeah, so it's like in 2022 there was a lot of happening around subscription in non-gaming, but in 2023 I think it will be even more happening, especially that on Android you will have much more flexibility to create different ways to approach new users, because now you have very kind of static plans, but with those new functionalities, you are able, for example, to create flexible plans. Like someone will get the free trial for the 7 days, and then he will get 80% of discounts for the next 2 months. And then after 2 months, he gets the kind of normal price. Yeah, so there will be much more flexibility to actually adjust the value to the specific set of the players. And then the next topic that I think will be very important is, of course, AI. And of course, you cannot have the presentation in beginning of 2023 without saying AI. Okay, I did it. And of course, what is quite interesting is that the AI is actually getting more and more democratized as well. Yeah, so because even smaller and smaller players can actually get benefit from that. Because we had even discussion before the event with a few people that this AI, especially in bigger companies, is used for quite a long time already. Yeah? So different like ML models, different AI topics. But what is happening, we see more and more democracy in the AI topics, especially in some tools that are sometimes for free. Like this very, very interesting feature that was added just recently by Firebase that is called remote config personalization, that actually allowed even small developer from Warsaw that is that has kind of a backgammon game to actually really adjust the personalized experience based on the specific metric for the different set of the users. And it's the company that has like 13 people together. They just use the the tool that know very well, in this case is Firebase, to really adjust the the experience for the users. And what we can do even with such things, like for example, we can adjust number of coins the user will get for the rewarded video, for example. Yeah, steering that some users we can get less, some people get more, depending on how likely they are actually to be churned, how likely they are actually be not using that without additional motivation. And then, of course, we can go even deeper because I think the topic is very hot. And even actually, I think even today, when I was really finishing the last, I think last 2 slides of the presentation, I just saw on the LinkedIn when someone was asking, okay, will you and your team will use the AI for like game production 2023? It's like more than 76% said yes, which means that again the topic is quite hot. And of course we have a lot of different use cases that can be in gaming, non-gaming, in terms of how to classify the content, how to adjust the content for different set of users, how to maybe have different systems to acquire users. Like most of the modern user acquisition systems, they're using AI for last like 2 years already, yeah? And they are getting more and more combination of black box and very AI professional system, depending who you ask, of course. And then the topics related to how to segment the users, keep the users happy, maybe sometimes changing the difficulty of the game, difficulty of the like onboarding on the non-gaming app, depending on his behavior in the app or game. Or maybe how to even improve the player experience by doing some translation or like sometimes adding the help. And of course then it's even coming more and more often even to not just game creation, but to creating the content. There are so different tools that are created to create the landing pages, create the ASO pages. We see kind of tons of them. Like different tools for like video production, different types of onboarding when you just like you can create sometimes the specific like creatives very fast, especially for those markets that can be interesting niche, but often are not your main priority. Yeah, because probably like if you are focused on US, you will not play with that. But if you are doing something for like less important markets, but those that require more personalization, then it can be quite interesting topic to try it out. And of course, there is like topics that needs to be taken into considerations, like sometimes economical side of the story. Yeah, so I remember like one of my bosses said that especially in the C region, every professional can be replaced by a limited number of interns. Yeah, so in the way that it's sometimes easier and cheaper to to do it by people than just hiring like very professional tools. And of course, like especially for smaller players, not always those solutions will be very economical. Of course, there's challenge around the data. Yeah, so I believe that the biggest benefits all those solutions are bringing to smaller players, but then of course in many cases they can have not enough data to actually feed those models with the data, which means again it creates a lot of room for growth and data teams to work together and get some innovation. And then of course like the topics, but like the topics, what is the balance between art and data science? So because it's like if everyone starts to use the same models, everyone starts to use the same tools, we can get to not very fun games and not very fun experiences. So that's why I think it's really about AI, but AI done in the right way and when it really makes sense and when it really adds the value, not just for the sake. And the last topic, which I think it's a little bit sometimes overlooked, is that we talk a lot about data, we talk a lot about the AI, but in many cases we are just overlooking and forgetting about really like making sure that those analytical capabilities in the companies are growing as well. And I think in that case, many teams are becoming more and more professional. Like there, you have more and more specialization in different areas of growth and different area of data. Like, okay, someone is specializing in UA for Google Ads, yeah. Someone is specializing in UA for remarketing and so on. Someone is specializing in like data engineering and so on. And of course, it brings a lot of value and a lot of innovation for the companies, but sometimes we can go too far. I think that a lot of value will be coming from the point that people are actually extending the knowledge beyond just the core as well. Why? Because there are so more and more dependencies between different topics. One interesting example, when we see that at specific point the retention dropped for that game. But why it happened? Because at specific moment, the ratio of CPI-driven campaigns grew quite significantly versus conversion and CPA-driven campaigns. And we know, like everyone who works with growth knows that in general, those conversion-driven campaigns have much higher retention by default, yeah, than just very cheap CPI-driven installs. Yeah, so if someone is analyst and he doesn't have any clue about the growth, about how UA works for the specific traffic channel, he can say, okay, something happened in our game. What is really happening, not connecting that actually it's really just the like the type of the traffic change, and then really skew the data. And then even if we look at who is actually coming to GameCamp Live, that's actually I looked at registration data and created kind of who is really coming even to those events. We see that actually a lot of people are either like people who are like founders, or like the people who are like doing ASO or like UA or like growth managers. And I think there's really strong value from specialization, but I really believe there's really a lot of value from getting to know, not just from my main core area, but trying to understand the different aspects of of the topics that I will work with. Okay, if I'm specializing in growth, it's really good to make sure that I understand the data as well. Yeah, so that in the way that even if I look at let's see some example ASO test, well, like the topic that is really typical for ASO, it's like if I start to ask myself, okay, what is the statistical significance of that test? You know, how to really verify at what point I should abandon the test. What should I do around the test? It's actually, we see that in more and more places there is really intersection of different fields. So, and that's actually why I even had the idea to have that meetup as the way to really make sure that people can actually not just get knowledge from their main core area, but have the opportunity to talk to the people from other aspects. Because in many cases, whatever we do, even in AI, we see that case like shit in, shit out. Yeah. So for example, like if I work on very sophisticated AI models, and I don't know really a lot about the users and what is really in that data, and what is the psychology of that user, how they're behaving towards different growth channels, towards different creatives and so on, it will be very hard to actually get outcome for the business. So again, I believe that in this case, the future of our work is that in one side we will be specializing in specific area where we say we are the best in specific area, but the more we know about at least basic stuff from other areas, the more innovation will come from our work. And I see sometimes that in many gaming or non-gaming companies, that interaction between the people is just coming to like monthly meetings or like some really big meetings when people meet like very rarely, because they don't have really other ways to interact with each other. Yeah, so how they actually can talk with the same language, understand the same topic. Yeah, so I think in this case, on one side, it's good to be specialized on your own work, but on the other hand, let's make sure that not everyone is just stuck in his hamster-based work. Okay, doing only the same thing over and over, not be open to other ideas, to other people. So use, I think, events like this one to get to know new people, find the people you don't know, because in many cases it's way more likely that you know other people from growth, but it's less likely that you know people from like data or from creative, from the industry. So again, that would be those 5 points from my side. So again, I think it's more and more important looking for those new market opportunities, remembering and understanding these data privacy topics, looking for those monetization opportunities, because actually even that monetization topic is very strongly related to that market opportunity and privacy. Let's make sure that we use that AI in the way that makes sense. And then, of course, we are not just really stuck in our own box, but we get out of it from time to time as well. And that would be actually all from my side. Happy to connect you on LinkedIn. That's my email address if you would like to ask me something after